Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us this evening. Today, we're going to learn more about Xcel's current proposal and plan for closing the Comanche 3 coal-fired power plant. We have some amazing speakers with us to dissect this proposal and help understand the complicated nuances of it. If you have any questions during the presentation, feel free to put them in the chat and we'll answer them at the end. You may also just wait until our Q&A session at the end. My name is Lila, and I'm a campaign organizer with COPERG, the Colorado Public Interest Research Group. And I'm working here in Pueblo to ensure that this energy facility is replaced with something clean and safe. We are a proud member of the Cleanup Xcel Coalition, made up of a wide range of groups across the state. Some of our members are on this slide. Today, we are going to cover a lot of ground, but here's what you can expect. We will provide some background on this and what the Public Utilities Commission is, and then we'll dive into the Xcel proposal itself. You'll hear from several speakers addressing the urgency of the situation from a multitude of perspectives, and then we'll discuss the steps on how you can take action from what you learn here today. So first, I'm going to provide a little bit of context. The Comanche 3 coal-fired power plant is the single largest greenhouse gas emitting facility in the state of Colorado. This site is shutting down in 2031, and right now the Public Utilities Commission is deciding what will be put in place. Xcel, the company that owns the facility, has proposed their plan for replacement, which you're going to hear more about throughout this webinar. Something that is important to note in your consideration of this proposal is that Xcel owns a facility, but Pueblo gets energy from Black Hills Utilities. So even though here in Pueblo is where the actual plant is, the energy actually gets sent up to Denver and other northern areas that use Xcel. This means that in Pueblo, the residents do not receive the energy. There's a small exception in that the steel mill is provided energy from Xcel. Anyway, as I mentioned before, the Public Utilities Commission is a governor-appointed group that will decide what will replace this retiring facility. This commission is made up of just 3 individuals, but they hold a lot of power as the sole deciding entity of this. Currently, they have opened a period of public comments in order to hear from the community and hopefully make this a more communal decision. This decision-making process will be completed in 2 phases, and the final decision likely won't be released until 2026. At the end of today's session, we will introduce you to how you can make your own public comment. I'd now like to hand the stage over to Danny Katz, Executive Director of the COPERG Foundation and a pioneer in environmental organizing for over 20 years.
Thank you. Let's see, let's go to the next slide here. So let me describe, so there's kind of a short-term piece to what the Xcel is proposing and a longer-term piece, but I think it all starts with this basic idea that there's a coal-fired power plant in Pueblo, and it has to close by 2031. So sometime in 2030, it will no longer be operating. And so the immediate question on the table is, what do you replace the roughly 850 megawatts from this power plant? And it's worth noting there are many days where it's not actually producing that much electricity. There's definitely been some problems with this plant for many, many years. But the capacity on paper is 850 megawatts. And so the most immediate question is, by 2031, what will replace the 850 megawatts? That's the immediate question, the short-term question. And based on the documents that we've seen and the proposal that Xcel has made, there's a couple of things that stick out. First, one of the things that we see is there's a number of different scenarios that Xcel has put, has evaluated, and 2 that they've put forward as preferred scenarios. And those 2 preferred scenarios range between 12 and 14 gigawatts, which, 850 megawatts is just under a gigawatt. So we're looking at proposals that are much, much bigger than what the current electricity capacity is of the power generation that's going to be discontinued by 2031. It's more than 14 times bigger. So that's the first thing that really sticks out is this is a very big proposal. Instead of just replacing the energy that this power plant produces, there's a preferred scenarios of producing nearly 14 times or more electricity. The second thing that sticks out is that within that there's a vision of having much of that new energy come from renewable sources and renewable sources connected to battery and storage technology that help make those renewable sources even more effective and reliable. However, there's still a significant percent that is envisioned that would be new gas. And when you're thinking about something that's 14 times bigger than what is currently in place, even if the percent is a bit small, so around 20% of what would be replaced would be gas, it's still a lot of new gas. In fact, more more capacity than the current coal-fired power plant. So that's important. And that would likely mean multiple gas facilities, multiple gas plants would need to come online if that's the vision, if that 1.5 to 2.6 gigawatts is the vision. The third piece is that what sticks out is, we do know we're moving in a direction where more things are getting plugged into our grid, whether it's electric vehicles or heat pumps, which are a cleaner electric version of a heating system in your home. And as those things get plugged in, we will need more energy, more electricity. And so at first blush, one could think that maybe the reason this proposal was so big is because there's going to be so many electric vehicles and so many heat pumps. But in actuality, only about a third of this large proposal is because of those new things that are getting plugged in, the electric vehicles and the heat pumps. In actuality, about 2/3 of the proposal is in order to accommodate what's called larger loads, things like data centers. And so that raises some pretty big questions. How likely is it that those new data centers and those new large loads are going to come online or come online in Colorado? There's certainly a risk to building a lot of electricity, but then nobody purchases it, and that could really come onto the backs of ratepayers. So there's some definitely important questions to ask there, especially if this proposal is envisioning that we're going to build an awful lot of new energy capacity to provide energy for these data centers, which are major consumers of energy. So we think there's some very important questions to be raised about whether that is the right future, whether this size is the right size for replacing this coal-fired power plant. But those are some of the more immediate things we see, the kind of short-term ideas that we see in the Xcel proposal. So I'm happy to answer questions in the chat or the Q&A as we continue on, but I'll turn it back to you, Lila.
Thank you, Danny. I'd now like to introduce Eric Frankowski. Eric is the Executive Director of the Western Clean Energy Campaign, a nonprofit working on the transition from coal and gas to clean energy in the western states of our country. He is an award-winning journalist and an expert in implementing media and communication strategies for groups working on sustainability issues. Thank you, Eric.
Thanks, Lila, and Danny, thanks for that recap. As Danny mentioned, there are two components to the resource plan that Xcel has filed. He went over what essentially is the short-term part of it. It's the part that's meant to replace the output from the retiring Comanche unit, as well as additional demand. Xcel has also proposed a very novel approach in its resource filing for much longer term planning. Think like 2040s, 2050s. The resource planning process typically is much shorter. There's a resource acquisition period in which they're looking at resources just for the immediate need. What Xcel has proposed essentially is a new mechanism that they say is needed to meet this new dynamic where there's a lot of new load coming from centers and artificial intelligence and electrification that the current resource planning process simply doesn't allow them to do. So what they've proposed is the creation essentially of a $100 million slush fund that would be paid for by customers, that would allow Xcel to start doing things like engineering studies and analysis on carbon-free energy sources for the future. So that could include things like carbon capture equipment that's added to gas plants. It could include small nuclear. It could include hydrogen. What Xcel wants to do essentially is use this $100 million slush fund to start researching, designing, engineering, and analyzing the potential for these experimental energy sources to meet future demand far down the road. This is not really part of the resource planning process. Xcel says it's needed. One thing that I do want to point out is that Xcel absolutely has the ability to do all those things now. It can research, it can design, it can analyze, it can do anything it wants to do with any sort of energy source that it thinks might be a potential source of capacity in the future. The difference is that Xcel's shareholders currently would pay for that sort of activity. What Xcel is proposing in this resource plan is essentially shifting all the risk and all the cost for that from its shareholders to its customers. The PUC will ultimately have to decide whether that is acceptable or not. But certainly there are big question marks around that shift in cost and risk from shareholders to Xcel customers. So that's all I have, Lila. I'm happy to answer questions when everything's all wrapped up.
Great, thanks, Eric. I'm excited to introduce our next speakers, Jamie Valdez and Velma Campbell. Jamie is a multicultural native of Pueblo, Colorado, with multi-generational roots in Southern Colorado. They are a proud parent and grandparent. He's a founding member and a leader of the Nuclear Free Colorado Coalition and an active member of Pueblo's Energy Future. Jamie recently served as a member of the Colorado's Environmental Justice Action Task Force and as the Colorado State Manager for Mothers Out Front, as well as having served as chair of the Sangre de Cristo group of the Sierra Club and president of the CSU Pueblo chapter of El Movimiento Estudiantil Chicano de Aztlán. Velma Campbell is a local environmental justice activist who has worked in various organizations to bring clean, equitable solutions to Pueblo. Most recently, she has worked in Nuclear Free Colorado Coalition and the environmental justice group Mothers Out Front. Velma has over 45 years of experience in the medical field working as an occupational preventative medicine physician. And I'll hand it over to the two of you now.
Thanks, Lila. Oh, did you want to chime in first, Velma?
No, thanks.
Okay. Thanks, Lila, and thank you to our previous presenters, Danny and Eric. That's excellent information. I'm going to just share with you some ideas of what we feel it looks like for what we feel a just transition looks like for Pueblo. And just right off the bat, I'll go ahead and say that any truly just transition should not continue the disproportionate impacts on this already overburdened and underserved Pueblo community. So that's kind of where we're starting from. We don't want to see false climate solutions that come with risks and hazards to the community. We don't want to see perpetuation of environmental injustices. According to the Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment, Puebloans experience increased rates of asthma, COPD, and cardiovascular disease compared to state averages. And we also have this Comanche coal plant in our community that, as has already been said, has been identified as the largest emitter of greenhouse gas in Colorado. And according to the EPA's toxic release inventory, it is also Pueblo's #1 source of other types of toxic air pollutants like hydrochloric acid and mercury and other bad stuff that can affect cardiovascular and respiratory health. So we've got this large emitter of these toxic air contaminants and greenhouse gas here in our community. And as I was just saying, Puebloans already experience disproportionate impacts on our health. And we also experience climate impacts in the form of extreme heat waves, the mega drought that's impacting the entire Western United States, and wildfires of increasing severity and frequency. And so, as I was saying, any just transition cannot continue this paradigm where Pueblo's health and local environment is sacrificed to generate electricity, whether it be for another community or our own. There are better ways to do this, and we would like to see those ways employed. And we can go on to the next slide. The better ways that we're talking about have to do with renewable energy, and I'll get more into that in a minute. So what we feel the Pueblo community needs is clean air, which we basically have right now. Our air is relatively clean, but it won't be if we don't protect it. We've got several of the state's largest emitters of toxic air contaminants, including the Comanche plant in our community. And the air won't stay clean if we don't keep it clean. So we also feel the Pueblo community needs clean water. We've got 3 tributaries to the Arkansas River converging with it, either in our community or near our community. That's the Fountain Creek, the Salt Creek, and the St. Charles River. The Fountain Creek is very contaminated. It's rated as impaired in all of its regulatory sectors for either E. coli, selenium, or both. And it's highly contaminated with PFAS forever chemicals. The St. Charles River is contaminated. This one is the one that we would focus on the most for this particular presentation and this effort, because it has been impacted by the coal ash ponds at the Comanche plant. And so we've got these tributaries coming into the Arkansas River that are being polluted either here in our community or nearby. And they're tributaries to the Arkansas River, which is a very important river to America. It's our 6th longest river in the country, and it serves millions and millions of people, wildlife, and livestock, all the way to its confluence with the Mississippi River. So we feel it's important for us to protect our waterways, not only for our own communities, but for our downstream neighbors, because we're all downstream. We also feel the Pueblo community, well, it's really just a fact that in order to have a strong workforce, you need a healthy populace. And so we feel Pueblo needs healthy people, just like any other place. We need good jobs. And when we say good jobs, we mean family sustaining union jobs. We've had situations where renewable energy companies specifically have come in and not been the greatest actors, and we are advocating for them to step it up and provide the good jobs that our communities need. So one of those companies right here in Pueblo is the CS Wind turbine manufacturing plant, and I'll talk more about that pretty soon. We feel Pueblo needs a diversified and sustainable economy. So right now, we have this almost like a panic going on over potential loss of jobs and tax revenue base because of the upcoming retirement of this coal-fired plant in our community. And we feel that Pueblo community needs to be no longer beholden to these large single employers that when they retire their operations in our community, we're left trying to scramble for to save a bunch of jobs. One thing I will say is that in its last ERP submission, Xcel agreed to retire the coal plant here in Pueblo without losing any jobs, and they agreed to pay the tax revenues, the property tax revenues to Pueblo County through 2040. So we feel this gives the Pueblo community a really great opportunity to step back, take a little time to explore our options, and really make better choices for our community than we have in the past. And all of this brings us to renewable energy and no false solutions. We feel that the proposal for gas with carbon capture is a false solution, a false climate solution. One of the reasons for that is because it's really still an experimental technology. Oftentimes these carbon capture technologies have been shown to require enough energy for the processes that they end up producing more or emitting more carbon than they're capturing. And so that's definitely a false climate solution. And nuclear, one of the glaring reasons that we feel nuclear is a false climate solution is because even industry insiders say that any new nuclear technology will take a minimum of 10 years to develop. And so according to the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, we don't have 10 years. And we don't even have to look to the IPCC. We can look at recent events. We just recently had 2 back-to-back Category 4+ hurricanes hit the United States. And like I said earlier, Puebloans are already experiencing climate impacts. So we really need to step it up, stay away from the false climate solutions and the snake oil sales pitches. And one thing that we definitely want to point out is that renewable energy sources are already proving themselves right here in Pueblo. So we have, as I mentioned earlier, the CS Wind wind turbine manufacturing plant here in Pueblo. That's one of the largest wind turbine manufacturing plants in the country. And they just earlier this year announced that they're going to be adding 850 or roughly 850 jobs right here in Pueblo. So they're proving themselves in the way of providing jobs, and they're proving themselves in the way of providing energy. As for providing energy, Pueblo just last year got its first net zero municipal building. That's the community health center over on the east side. It's generating more electricity than it needs with solar panels on the parking lot and roof of the building. And it's heated and cooled using geothermal energy. So, and then we also have CSU Pueblo recently announced that the university is now Colorado's first net zero college or university, also generating more electricity than they require. So we've got these awesome renewable energy sources doing their thing here in Pueblo. Another one I would like to mention is the Bighorn solar array out by the Comanche plant. That's a solar array that's dedicated to powering the CF or the Evraz steel mill, formerly CF&I. In the 70s, the Evraz steel mill switched from the old blast furnace to an electric arc furnace. And now that electric arc furnace is roughly 80% powered by the solar array out there near the Comanche plant, known as the Bighorn solar array. So this gives us hope that even large-scale manufacturing operations like a steel mill can be powered by renewable energy. Let's go ahead and move on to the next slide. Velma, please feel free to jump in here if you'd like to talk about some of this.
Sure, like Jamie says, our community, which has a lower than average income, has a higher than average percentage of chronic lung disease, asthma, and cardiovascular disease. And whether or not we can directly tie those conditions to pollution from any one source, the impact of added pollution to the environment of people with chronic diseases does not do anything good for their health. And as Jamie pointed out, the Xcel plant is the largest emitter of greenhouse gas in the state, even though it often is not running at capacity. So when we look at just transitions, we're talking about benefits to our community's health, to our community's environment, and the overall effect of that would be to improve the quality of life in our community, but also the quality of the economic status, the sustainability, the economic sustainability in our community. We feel that not only is a healthy environment and a healthy economy not mutually exclusive, they're actually mutually dependent. If we don't figure out a way to have both, we're going to end up with neither. Thanks.
That's right. Thanks, Velma. As Velma was mentioning, Pueblo is a low-income community. Our median household income hovers right around $42,000 per year, which puts us significantly lower than either the state or national median household income. And so when we're talking about the jobs and the economic benefits of some of these technologies, we really have to take into consideration, like, are they really benefiting our community? Let's go ahead on to the next slide, please. So Xcel's just transitions ERP. We're going to be calling on Xcel Energy and the PUC to invest more in, or to encourage more investment in the Pueblo area in renewable energy, sources like wind and solar, and possibly geothermal. And then we're going to be calling on them to look at battery storage solutions, battery storage options. There's a similar situation in Hayden, Colorado, where Xcel owns the Hayden coal plant. And there was talk of that plant being replaced with a liquid sodium battery storage unit. And this is a unit where they would heat up the liquid sodium, and when we have energy, and then when we need energy, when we have excess energy, we heat up the sodium. When we need energy, then we can go and use that heated sodium to boil water, turn turbines, and generate electricity. And so it's a much safer solution, and this can be another solution that can provide jobs as well. So these are technologies that are advancing at a much faster rate than either the carbon capture or nuclear technologies. And we feel that renewables will be able to power Pueblo's energy needs and the energy needs of other communities in Colorado long before either of those other technologies will be able to. For that reason and other reasons, including the energy justice of the ratepayers, we're going to be calling on the PUC to not approve the slush fund that you heard about earlier. This slush fund, as you heard about, will be basically putting ratepayers on the hook, not only for the capital construction that's going to happen anyway, but also for the research and development of potential future technologies that may or may not ever come to feasibility. And so we feel that's just adding an undue burden onto the ratepayers, and we really want to see justice for not only the Pueblo community, but also those ratepayers in the Denver area and other areas of the state. So we're calling on the PUC to not approve of the slush fund, and or Xcel Energy to just remove it before it even makes it that far. we're calling our overarching message is no false solutions. As I mentioned earlier, carbon capture is a false climate solution. And when it's used in these applications for energy generation, it's really just an excuse for fossil fuel companies to continue burning fossil fuels when what we really need to be doing is moving away from fossil fuels. Nuclear energy, as I said earlier, there's no way it's going to be ready in time for us to really be any kind of real climate solution. Not to mention the fact that there isn't a technology in existence right now that has solved the problem of radioactive nuclear waste, and the Pueblo community would have to store that radioactive waste right here in our community because of NRC regulations. So I see your hand, Velma. Go ahead and jump on it.
Sorry, I was trying to give that a thumbs up. You hit the wrong button. But you're right, the nuclear option is not an option. It's a technology that has yet to be developed and yet is out there being pushed using billions of taxpayer dollars in a sales pitch designed to create an artificial demand for a product that doesn't even exist yet, and is subsidized at a rate of approximately $8 to $10 for every dollar that's provided to renewable energy. So that's something that we really need to be turned around at the national level.
That's right. Considering those that disproportionate subsidy situation, if it weren't for those subsidies, nuclear wouldn't even be a part of the conversation. So let's go on to the next slide. So that brings us to the end. In summary, again, we feel that this Pueblo community has already been overburdened with pollution and the impacts on our health, as well as climate impacts. And that's a paradigm that has to change. Pueblo is a really great community. It's an awesome place to live, and our people deserve better. We need to put a higher value on our public health, our environment, and our labor. So here's our contact information. Please feel free to contact us if you're interested in getting involved. We are just starting up a new nonprofit here in Pueblo, focused on environmental justice for the Pueblo and Southern Colorado area from a Southern Colorado perspective. So yeah, feel free to contact us if you have any questions, if you'd like to get involved, or whatever. Thank you.
Thank you, Jamie and Velma. I'm going to introduce our final speaker, Naomi Sylvester, current campaign organizer with COPER, working in Pueblo to collect widespread grassroots support for the implementation of renewable energy in place of Comanche 3. I'd also encourage you all to start thinking of questions for our Q&A session, which will take place right after Naomi speaks. All right, go ahead, Naomi.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Lila. Okay. So you've heard all about Xcel's plan and just like why it doesn't make sense for Pueblo and the greater state of Colorado. So what can you do as an individual to make sure that there is a replacement plan that is better for the people and for the planet? Well, the first thing you can do is vocalize your concerns directly to the PUC. In fact, we have a petition right here that you can do that with. This is a QR code that will send you directly to a petition letter that you can sign. And by signing this, you'll be showing support for the implementation of renewable energy at the Comanche 3 site. We will be submitting these petitions directly to the Public Utilities Commission as public comments to show thousands of names of people who want better, cleaner solutions. So I urge you all to scan this code and sign your name to express concerns for major polluting facilities being put in our backyards. I'll give you a second to do so, and then I'll drop the link in the chat as well. Great. Okay. So the next thing you can do is help get more media coverage around this issue. This can be done through writing letters to the editor and sending them into your local newspapers for publishing. So write up a blurb around 200 words to express your frustrations around Xcel's gas proposal and make it personal to you, focusing on 1 or 2 topics to make sure it's succinct and to the point. Then simply look up your local newspaper's letter to the editor email address and send it over to them. And this is just a really great way to get more visibility and people talking about this issue. And then if you want to voice your opinion to the Public Utilities Commission past just a petition signature, you can also submit a more lengthy public comment via email, phone call, handwritten letters, or just by scanning this QR code that will bring you to a Google form for their website. This just allows you to raise more individualized concerns and have these decision makers hear from people who have more localized knowledge and personal connection to the case. And make sure to reference the proceeding number in your letter or comment, which is 24A-0442E. I'll leave this up for a second, but again, you can drop it in the chat. And if you want more information on this, you can go to their website at puc.colorado.gov. Cool. What you can also do if you are an organization or as an individual and you want to take this a step further, you can apply to be an intervener in this legal proceeding. This kind of status allows for people to present evidence and arguments directly to the PUC during their hearing sessions. Again, more information can be found at their website at puc.colorado.gov. And then if you just want to stay kind of updated throughout this journey, scan this QR code to receive emails with updates about other upcoming events and ways to get involved, as well as just kind of what's happening with the PUC during this lengthy decision-making process. And whatever way you decide to get involved and take action against harmful polluting facilities is greatly appreciated and very helpful in pushing forward a world where energy is clean and safe and no single human has to be exploited for the benefit of others. So thank you guys so much.
Thank you, Naomi, and to all of our speakers here tonight. We're now going to begin to switch over to our Q&A session. So anyone who has any questions, we'd love for you to drop them in the chat or use the Q&A function, and we'll present them to the panelists to answer. Thank you. I guess to kick it off, we'll start with one common question that we get a lot here on the ground, which is just addressing the feasibility and reliability of wind. So I would love for some panelists to touch on that.
I can talk a little bit about one of the things that we've really seen is that the technology around battery and storage has really come a long way, and all signs point to it's going to go a lot further in the next 5 to 7 years as we think about what do we need to do to replace this single power plant down in Pueblo. So I think all signs point to battery and storage will continue to develop and be a great partner technology for wind and solar, such that as we build more wind and build more solar, we can take advantage of the energy even when the wind isn't blowing and the sun isn't shining, because we can store the energy effectively and use it at night or on lower, on days that just aren't as windy. So I think in terms of reliability, we're seeing a big increase there. And I think we're nowhere near at this point in the state of Colorado, a place where we need to slow down on building more renewable energy. We're not at a point, I think, right now where there is so much renewable energy that we need to slow down. The capacity is there in Colorado to give us be more than we need for to get to 100% renewables. And I think the technology of battery and storage will make that something that can be effectively used, along with potentially things like geothermal, which can also be more of a 24/7 energy source.
Vilma?
Thanks so much. And Danny's right about that. And as Jamie said, there are proposals here in Colorado for for at least 2 different types of battery storage. And we already have one of the solar projects here in Pueblo County that's associated with its own battery storage capacity. But I think another element of the especially wind and solar capacity that often gets ignored by the advocates of nuclear power and fossil fuels is the fact that capacity itself is a kind of storage. And one of the improvements that needs to be made to our electrical system is the ability to interconnect and communicate the needs, connect the needs with the generating areas. And the advocates of nuclear and other false solutions like to talk about transmission of renewable energy as if it's somehow magically different from transmitting any other type of energy. Yes, some of the connecting elements may be different and some of the procedures may be different, but my answer to the question about what about when but that the sun never doesn't always shine and the wind doesn't always blow, my answer to that has become yes, it does somewhere. What we need to do is to be able to interconnect with those the needs with the generation, and with enough support for renewable energy, that can happen.
Thank you both. I'm seeing some questions in the chat regarding pollution and considerations as Xcel makes proposal about what that would mean for a potentially larger polluting facility and what considerations are in place there. So I'd love to hand that over to the panelists to answer. Danny, go ahead.
Yeah, I can dive in. I mean, I think the level of details in the proposal don't allow us to be able to say with certainty this will be more polluting or less polluting. But I think the basic concept is this. There's a coal-fired power plant, it produces pollution. A gas-fired power plant, it produces pollution. If you're proposing to replace a coal-fired power plant with a gas-fired power plant, then you're still proposing something that will produce pollution. And if we're going down the path of building 14 times more energy capacity than the current power plant, is on paper producing, then, the question I think the person is trying to get at is, does on the larger side, I think 2.5 to 3 gigawatts of gas, is that as dirty or dirtier than 850 megawatts of coal? A lot of it will depend on the technology that's selected and those sorts of things, but I think it misses, the bigger point we're, I believe, trying to make is why replace something that produces pollution with something else that produces pollution when there's plenty of other options that don't. So I think that's really, I don't think we need to be going down the path of something that produces less pollution when we have something that produces no pollution.
Thank you so much, Danny. We'll leave a few moments for everyone to drop any more questions in the chat. And for now, I will also let you know that we would love to direct you to our coalition website, cleanupxcel.com. We'll drop that in the chat to learn more information. I hope this has been an informative experience. There's still so much more to know, so make sure you sign up for updates, and thank you all for coming out.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Thanks
everybody.
Thanks for hosting, Danny.
Yep.
Yeah, thanks, Coburg.